Mike. Toronto. VK on the beat. Check. I'm in Toronto where you wanna get the city love. I'm from Toronto where you wanna get the city love. I'm in Toronto like we wanna get the city love. My city love me back for my city love.
Welcome to episode 1464 of Toronto Mic'd, proudly brought to you by Great Lakes Brewery, a fiercely independent craft brewery who believes in supporting communities, good times, and brewing amazing beer. Order online for free local home delivery in the GTA. Palma Pasta. Enjoy the taste of fresh, homemade Italian pasta and entrees from Palma Pasta in Mississauga and Oakville. The Toronto Maple Leafs baseball team, the best baseball in the city outside the Dome, with Rod Black's mustache returning for the home opener at Christie Pitts on May 12th. RecycleMyElectronics.ca, committing to our planet's future, means properly recycling our electronics of the past. The Advantaged Investor Podcast from Raymond James Canada. Valuable perspective for Canadian investors who want to remain knowledgeable, informed, and focused on long-term success. Season 6 of Yes, We Are Open, a Moneris podcast hosted by FOTM Al Grego and Ridley Funeral Home, pillars of the community since 1921. Today, returning to Toronto Mic'd is Bruce Dowbiggin. Welcome back, Bruce.
Good to be here. Good to be here. But by the way, just real quick for Joe Flaherty today.
Yeah, you know,
R.I.P.
actually here, a little bit of off the top. Sad news this morning. I woke up to this news, but I got just a little taste of Joe.
Hi everyone, Count Floyd here, reminding you to watch this Saturday night at 11 o'clock for Monster Chiller Horror Theater. We got a scary one for you this week. It's that three-dimensional semi-classic Dr. Tongue's House of Cats. It's in 3D, so you'll have to send away for your special glasses. Now let's take a look at some chilling scenes from Dr. Tongue's House of Cats.
Some Count Floyd there. Yeah, sad news. You were a big SCTV fan?
Yeah, huge. Knew a couple of them. Catherine O'Hara. Yeah. I knew a little bit back in high school days, the university days, and did some stuff side by each with them. And just the fact that they did all those shows up in Edmonton is a killer. There's nothing to do up there. They're up at, I think it was the Markovitz's owned the studio up there, and they were stuck. And there was nothing else to do but just do that goofy stuff. He did a good Dick Beddoes, by the way, Joe Flaherty. When they did the ripoff of Face Off.
Right.
Yeah, he did a Dick Bedclothes, he called himself, and he inserted himself in there.
And, you know, for the younger set, although I think even the younger set, if they're listening to Toronto Mic'd, they love their SCTV if they find the clips on YouTube. Let me get back to the Scorsese doc in a second. But Freaks and Geeks, Joe Flaherty played the dad on Freaks and Geeks, and very good. He's just a great loss, and he's a Pittsburgh guy, right? He was one of those guys. I remember growing up, watching SCTV and realizing they weren't all Canadian. This was like a big moment when I said, oh, wait a minute, Andrea Martin's not Canadian? Like, you sort of you just assume they're all kind of Canadian, and then you learn some of them were imported, and Joe was one of those imports. I
ended up one night, I don't remember what the year was, and in those days we used to go to the fire hall to see the stage show. Right. I remember ending up like 1 a.m. sitting on a sofa at somebody's house watching old movies, and Dave Thomas was on the sofa, and I think Moranis might have been there. Anyhow, They were just cutting up about the movie, and I just thought this was the funniest thing. And we always rooted for them, right? There was Saturday Night Live, and that was the American show, right. And SCTV a lot of the time handed their hat to them, really. It was very creative, and they were nice people too. I mean, there wasn't, none of them came to a bad end particularly, right? No, you're right. And shout out to Dave Thomas, who is the FOTM in the bunch, right? He'll take my calls. Actually, I think I'll hook up with him and chat a little bit about Joe Flaherty for the Ridley Funeral Home Memorial episode for the month of April. But sad news, Joe. I think he was 82, I believe. 82, okay.
And by the way, 82... And speaking of ages, I want to say happy birthday to you, Bruce. You turned 70 last week.
Yeah, the big 7-0.
How does it feel? Like, are the parts falling apart? Or how are you feeling?
Well, I used to say that 50 was the new 40 and 60 is the new 50. 70 is the new 70. It's at that point at which your age catches up with how you feel. As long as I get enough sleep, I'm okay, I think. And
Is that the secret?
Go away for 2 months to Florida.
Okay, so you're just coming back from Florida right now.
Yeah, we have a family place down there, and I went down to spend some time. And,
nice.
Yeah, we have friends who live down there, and so it's kind of a nice place to get away from Calgary winters, that's for sure.
Well, I have a little. So not every guest has their own like music that they want for the intro. I'm going to play a little bit of this song, talk to you about it, and then I'm going to let the listenership know how they can catch up on previous Bruce Dowbiggin episodes. And then we're going to have a great chat as usual. I'm glad you're here. You're going to be well rewarded. You're actually setting a record today. So you're the first episode of April. You're going to receive more swag for being in the basement than any previous guest in the history of Toronto Mic'd.
I'm touched.
Are you like soak that in? Okay, let's not bury this lead here. Okay, so that's 1,464 episodes. The record is being set today. No one left with more value than you, Bruce Dowbiggin. You're touched.
I am. No, it's just I can't find the words.
Your son's still in Long Branch, or
yeah, he lives down
Alderwood. Is that Alderwood or Long Branch?
Lives down the road from here, still at TSN.
Yeah, I follow him on Twitter. I get all my fun facts.
I was with him yesterday.
Mind
blows.
blows.
His daughter and his wife. Yeah.
Yeah, a little music for the Bruce Dowbiggin.
Another West trip, RRG to Calgary. I always knew she'd get used to me leaving someday. Loveless words now, her tears have run dry. I can tell by the way she doesn't hold me as tight. And she's thinking maybe she's better off alone. Nobody warned me, nobody told me I'd leave there so broken, come back so lonely. I'm killing my soul for the life that I'm leaving behind. 2 weeks on it, 2 weeks off. My blood is wearing thin and my stomach's in knots. Too much thinking about the time you've lost when it's 2 weeks on it, 2 weeks off.
Bruce, tell me about this song. 2 weeks.
2 weeks on, 2 weeks off. It's the East Pointers. It's a fantastic band out of the Maritimes, out of Prince Edward Island. And the song is about a reality in Canada that doesn't get a whole lot of attention, which is the transportation of people from the Maritimes to Alberta, flying across the country to go and do, well, in his case, he's talking about 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off. A lot of the time, it's 6 weeks on and 6 weeks off. Guys sharing beds, and one guy will share a bed with a guy who's working the night shift, etc. And it's a song about the lifestyle and you know what's happening in the Maritimes, and that people can't stay home, and it doesn't get a whole lot of attention. And those of us in Alberta, of course, we know the people. Some of them come and stay, some of them come to become Albertans. And the East Pointers, again, if you don't know them, last summer was our 40th wedding anniversary, so we did an Airbnb and we rented this beautiful big house in PEI down near the Strait. And it turned out that it was owned by the guy who is the lead of this band.
Get out of here.
Yeah. And
EastEnders?
Yeah.
East Pointers. Sorry, yeah, EastEnders is like a soap out of England, I think.
So there's all the room is covered with Juno Awards and Atlantic East Music, whatever. It's all this stuff. And so like a fuse blows and he has to come over and we meet him and chat with him a little bit. But I'm thinking, there's Cayley players, there's fiddle players all over the place in the Maritimes. Great ones. I'm not
Cape Breton and for sure.
I'm not diminishing them. So but I don't think of a lot of it. So we go back to New Brunswick in November, and my wife says, "Oh, look at this! The East Pointers are playing at the Fredericton Playhouse." So I said, "Let's get tickets." Off we go, and they just blew me away. I mean, if you don't know their music, they're kind of a little bit like Lord Huron. They're kind of a little bit like. What's the name? Mumford and Son. They've got a combination of stuff. And Tim Chason is the lead. They were a threesome, and his cousin Casey was the banjo player. And Casey during COVID died of an aortic aneurysm.
Oh no!
So we go to the show, and there's this really sadness about it because they're just trying to find themselves and where they are. They have these songs they've written about this guy that's gone, and the legacy and where are they going. And Yeah, these guys travel the world, and if you just give them a listen, they're fantastic. And as I say, the kind of the connection to Alberta and the connection to the West seemed important.
No, absolutely. I heard Calgary name checked and off the top of that song.
WestJet, the WestJet flight. That's
right.
WestJet would book all of these unique flights from Maritimes, different places in the Maritimes, to Fort Mac usually.
Sure. Well, now you're reminding me of the SCTV parody of Going Down the Road, which features Joe Flaherty, right? He's he's going into surgery, and then John Candy's there, who's a lawyer, and he's like, this is in the Maritimes somewhere. And he says, we're going to Toronto. They got that's a hard word to say. Lawyer-in jobs, and they got doctor-in jobs, and they're full of jobs, and it's the Going Down the Road parody. And they were those were Maritimers looking for jobs. So,
and well, it's still a reality. Not to bring down the room or whatever, but
no, the real talk.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks for introducing me to the East Pointers, and I think all guests should bring a jam when they come over. And
well, we did Frank and we did Tony with Steve Paikin.
Yeah. Well, okay. Let me cover that ground here before we dive into it. So your debut on Toronto Mike. So this is your second visit in person, right?
Yes.
Okay, so your first visit in person was December 2019, like the before times, okay? Everything was normal. The Raptors had just won the NBA championship.
Did they win the championship?
They did. You guys don't talk about
Hard
that
to remember.
in Alberta?
Hard to remember. No.
I heard it was Canada's team. Okay.
They are.
Okay, and that was episode 5. So that was 556. It was almost 1,000 episodes ago. But in episode 556, Mike chats with sports writer and broadcaster Bruce Dowbiggin about his years at CBC, the Calgary Herald, the Globe and Mail, his thoughts on Don Cherry, Alan Eagleson, Donald Trump. I will get back to Alan in a moment later in this conversation. Donald Trump, I wonder if he'll come up, his Twitter persona, and his new book, Cap in Hand. So we talked for like 95 minutes in December 2019. So if you were here in person before, that means you did receive a Palma Pasta lasagna, right?
I did.
Okay, you're going to get another one.
And beer.
Well, you're getting both. Okay, so fresh craft beer and another frozen Palma Pasta lasagna are both yours for making the trek here.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
That's why you got to make the trip to Toronto, because you zoom in, you don't get all that.
I got to feed my son and his kids.
Absolutely. We did get you back during the pandemic. You zoomed in, and that was December 2021, so 2 years later. Mike catches up with Bruce Dowbiggin before he kicks out the jam. So you did play, and we chatted about your 10 favorite songs of all time.
It was 10 favorites. That's right.
And then you're right with you mentioned this earlier, but Steve Paikin, we had this idea. I'm trying to remember what was the impetus for this. It was before Tony Bennett passed away. That's for sure. It was March 2022, and it was episode 1010. See, I could have done like a CFRB retrospective. That's what I do, right? Like I did a 1050 and I did a 1430, which we'll get to in a moment, but I did it was pretty cool, episode 1430. But I did not do a CFRB retrospective. Mainly because I never listened to the station. But Mike is joined by Steve Paikin and Bruce Dowbiggin as they discuss Frank Sinatra versus Tony Bennett with songs and stories. That was great. We did an hour and 48 minutes, and I re-released a good chunk of that when Tony passed away.
Yeah, it was fun because we both grew up with those guys, and we had to decide who would take Tony and who would take Frank. Eventually, I think Steve took Frank.
Well, you weren't going to pry Frank from Steve's hands.
No, from his cold, bloody hands. He loves Frank.
Good luck with that one. By the way, speaking of Steve Paikin, a question came in from Dwayne claiming, who actually it's not a question, it's a comment. As I reread it, it says, loved his show on The Fan with Steve Paikin. So remind everybody about the show that you co-hosted with Steve Paikin on The Fan, and then remind me, that was 590, right? Not 1430.
It was 590, yes. They were up on Cherry Street at that time, I think, just at Yonge and Egg. And I was doing a million things. I was doing the CBC 6 and 11. I was doing weekend stuff. I was writing books. And Steve came up with the idea, why don't we fill the morning slot 9 to 11, which, as you know, in commercial radio is a dead zone. The programmers don't care.
Right.
I think we came up with an advertiser or two, and so we had it for...
You had to sell your own ads.
Yeah.
So did you receive any money from whoever, Telemedia, whoever the hell owned the station?
No. They said, you can have the time. We will take... I think 2 commercial spots per half hour. I can't remember what the formula was. We knew we weren't really going to make money. It was kind of a fun thing for Steve and I to do, and we did 2 years of it there.
Kind of ahead of its time, really. Like that became a model for many a broadcaster as time went on. But did you consider, hiring a salesperson, or did you?
We had salespeople.
Okay.
They just weren't very good.
Okay, that's
sorry,
that's
Howard,
my problem.
Sorry to say that, Howard. No, we had people. It's, as I said, it's a bit of a dead zone in commercial radio. In those days, though, it still was the template still worked. That was 9 to 11 and On the Fan was still a much listened to spot, and so we thought we'd get in on it. And we hear from people all the time who used to listen to the show. And
well, Dwayne Claiming himself here, I hope I'm saying that right. Dwayne Claiming loved that show, and he's still talking about it years later.
Well, it was called Double Play because Dowbiggin and Pakin, the DP, and all that sort of stuff.
Hey.
And we were working very hard on the creative. Anyhow, he and I come from different backgrounds. He loves sports, but he's a political guy. I was a sports guy, and I liked politics, and so we sort of met somewhere in the middle.
What was your ball team? Now you're 70 years old, so I know you predate the Toronto Blue Jays. Did you have a team pre-Blue Jays that was your team, or did you adopt the Jays as your team? Because I know that's Pakin's story where he was a Red Sox guy and he just simply stayed a Red Sox guy.
Yeah, he couldn't give him up. What a coward. No, in the 60s, I was a Detroit Tiger fan.
Yeah.
So it was the Denny McLain years.
Right.
I used to model my pitching motion on Denny McLain. He was my hero. And then the Expos came to Montreal. I was in Montreal, and one day somebody knocked on my door and said, "Hey, you know who moved into our neighborhood?" And I said, "No." I was 14 years old. He said, "The catcher for the Montreal Expos moved in." And sure enough, it was John Bateman, the first catcher for the Expos, was 3 doors down from us. And the second baseman moved into the same development, Gary Sutherland, and Steve Renko as well. So those 3 guys. And I got to know and become a baseball fan through John. And I sort of became his caddy in the neighborhood. I babysit for his teams. He showed me how to throw a curveball, gave me my first cleats. He gave me a Jimmy Wynn baseball glove. So I became a dyed-in-the-wool Expos fan. My wife was worried about me when they'd lose. She'd have to leave the room. That's how bad it was. It was bad.
Okay, so Blue Monday was a tough day in the Dowbiggin household.
It was pretty rough. It was pretty. The week before that, and we're just staying downtown around Bay and Bloor, and it reminds me that my brother got married at the church on St. Mike's campus, and unfortunately for him, the Sunday game, I believe it was the Sunday game, or Saturday, it must have been Saturday, was the Game 5 of the Expos playoff game against the Philadelphia Phillies, the only series they ever won. And my brother's getting married, and all of us have transistor radios. Of course, this is the days before cell phones or anything.
Right.
And people are scuttling off to the washroom. Why has everybody got to go to the bathroom all the time? We're scuttling off and giving each other updates on the score of the game. So we were that committed to it. And in the old days, again, if you remember before the Blue Jays came in, I think there was a station in Oshawa.
I do not actually, but I'm dying. I love hearing the stories. I have no memory pre-Blue Jays.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, there was a station in Oshawa that used to bring the Expo games in. I think there was somewhere down in the southwest of Ontario too. And so we could listen to the games, and they were the national team, etc. And then pretty much the Blue Jays killed the Expos eventually. And that was because they did business better than the Expos. And the Expos had a market, but they couldn't make money out of it. And the Blue Jays sure learned how to make money.
So I have in the vast archives of Toronto Mike, where you get those 3 previous Bruce Dowbiggin episodes. And as I liked your tweet yesterday was something like, people can now ask, why does he keep having that guy on the show? Bruce, look at me. Do you think I care? Like, if I get these, like, why you have this Bruce Dowbiggin, conservative Western Canadian, if his Trump, not that you're a Trumper, but that you are sympathetic to much in the Trump world. Do you think I care? Would that make me say I'm not booking this guy anymore?
I've been in the business long enough to know that that's a more interesting tease than I'm going to be joining Toronto Mike, and we'll have a good conversation. Nobody gets interested.
No, I know. I'm just letting the listeners know.
I'd have really gassed it up if I wanted to put Trump in there. Anyway.
You should see the emails I get when I announce that Steve Simmons is returning to the program. Whoa, okay. No, that just makes me want to book him.
And what do they say about Steve?
Oh, Mike, this will be a typical note I'll get. Mike, I love your show, but I am not listening to this episode with Steve Simmons. I might always reply like, okay, like you don't even have to tell me you're not listening. Like I won't know if you listen or not. You can just not listen. Like that's an easier route.
Well, this will get back to at some point, I'm sure, where we end up talking about the culture today, is that we have to listen to people on both sides. You have to listen to people who you disagree with. You have to hear their argument. You have to understand where they're coming from, rather than create a little, sort of a caricature of them and just put them in the corner. I won't talk to them. It's
Right. Like you dehumanize them somehow. Like, oh, those are monsters, and then you're in your echo chamber, and then you're just getting back what you put out, and then of course it validates everything, like it edifies everything,
Yep.
and I personally like having conversations with people who have different values or beliefs or different religions and all these different. I just like talking to different people and collecting their stories.
I mentioned to you off mic that when we were coming north, we'd done a sort of tour of Civil War battlefields.
Right.
And I was at Antietam, and for people who don't know that, 1862, and it was the single most lethal day in the history of American military combat. 23,000 casualties in the same day. So we were walking the field, and I've seen the pictures. It was also the start of Matthew Brady, who was the first sort of famous photographer who went live to places and took pictures of dead bodies and stuff. And I'd seen all those pictures, and I was standing there at Antietam, and it led me to thinking about how do we get to the point where people who have so much in common are willing to bayonet a guy or shoot a guy or kill somebody or blow them up with a cannon. How did they get there? And how do we avoid getting there ourselves? And it just kind of struck me that I'm not saying we're going to have a civil war, but we're reaching that point where we've demonized people that we don't want to talk to anymore.
No, yeah, exactly. Demonized, yeah, exactly. And quick little, by the way, Dale Cadeau is on the live stream and he agrees with you. He says the days of proper, respectful debate are gone. So Dale, I'm here to tell you, look, this is the home for that. Like, I'm not afraid to talk to somebody who maybe we're on different sides of the political spectrum or whatever. That's fine. We'll have a civil conversation. We're not going to call each other ass. We're not going to break out into a fight, Bruce. I'm not fighting you.
Well, the ratings would be good.
That's why I got the cameras down here, just in case a fight breaks out. But real quick to catch up, because I want to revisit the Expos.
Yeah, go ahead.
But Hayref also points out, he just reminds us that the fan was on Holly Street. I don't remember.
I said Cherry
yeah, you said
Street.
Cherry Street, so it's Holly
One of
Street.
those-
Like, you're getting fact checked in real time.
One of those shrubs.
Thank you to Robert Lawson for the fact checking. But he just points out that the Bruce Dowbiggin Steve Paikin show was great because he liked it because he thought it was intelligent sports talk. And I'll say there's something to be said about intelligent sports talk. And if you're delivering those goods, I'll be buying.
It was also at the time. My biggest hero in sort of sports writing and sports broadcasting was Bill James, because Bill James he brought into the idea that you can actually think about these things. You don't have to be an analyst. You don't have to believe in analytics,
right.
But the idea that you could think about things. And so we tried to bring a little of that stuff early on. One of my favorite memories of doing the show is we decided, I can't remember why, our kids had the day off, so we brought our kids into the studio, and our backs were pointed to the apartment building across the street, so we couldn't see what was going on across the street. And our kids were sitting on the other side, and we're having fun, and they're very excited. And then I find out from my producer, and they said, take a look what's going on across the street. So we look across the street, and literally in the third floor opposite us, a couple is going, they are going heroically.
Like at the Sky Dome that day.
It was like the Sky Dome. It was heroically. So now we know this is going. We're trying to protect our kids from watching this sort of thing going on. We're also trying to stay on topic. What
wow.
fun.
Okay,
What
that's when you want cameras in the broadcast booth. Okay,
What
so
fun.
shout out to Bill James. Now, back to the Expos real quick here is that in the vast feed, there is an episode. I did a deep dive because I like the Expos quite fine because in the Toronto Star, when I would read my box scores and stuff, they bolded Toronto in the American League standings, and I would check in every day. Where are we in the AL East? That was every morning. I did, where are we in the AL East? And then of course they would bold Montreal on the National League side. So I took them as like your second team. Like it's sort of like I took this hint, like, oh, that's the only other Canadian team, and I was rooting for them, but I didn't really appreciate the traumatic history of the team. Like, so Danny Gallagher came on Toronto Mike. Danny Gallagher has written many books about the Montreal Expos, and we did like a deep dive, and there's lots of great audio in there. And shout out to Leslie Taylor, who's listening right now, and her father would call games for the Expos. And
Russ Taylor?
Yep.
Oh, I used to listen to Russ and Dave Van Horn, year one.
Yeah, the late great Russ Taylor, and his daughter listens, and he's got another daughter who is actually one of the comedians from the Baroness Von sketch show.
Oh, they're funny.
Yeah, and also you might have heard of a series on Crave about figure skating called I Have Nothing, where anyway, it's Carolyn Taylor is her name.
I don't know that one.
And she's also an FOTM, so shout out to the Taylors and Russ Taylor and all the Expos memories with sound clips and everything, all in that episode of Toronto Mike with Danny Gallagher, so dig that up. But before we move on from baseball.
Just one Russ Taylor.
Anything about Russ Taylor?
Russ Taylor, he was famous in Montreal because he was a local guy. He was kind of like the CFTO sports guy, and then he was doing play-by-play, and he wasn't really into play-by-play. And they had him as the analyst. Anyhow,
right.
The famous one is Rusty Staub. He goes into the gap. He's running. He one gloves it in the gap.
One gloves
He one gloves it. Anyhow.
There you go.
Famous.
It's a cannonading play there. Okay. So the book in front of you, Mr. Dowbiggin, is called The Toronto Maple Leafs History Book, and that is the Toronto Maple Leafs baseball team, and I think you'll really dig that book. It's a hardcover, well-researched, very informative book about the baseball team. They play their games at Christie Pitts here in Toronto. Just to be clear, because I was told maybe I haven't been clear, there is no tickets for these games. Like, this is an unticketed event. You literally just come to Christie Pitts and watch them. The best baseball outside the Dome, and it's going to be a great year. Rob Butler is the manager, and he was over here a couple of weeks ago. Yeah, his story is quite wild, him and Rich Butler coming out of East York. And, Rob Butler's on that 93 World Series team. So there's a lot of stories in that episode of Toronto Mike. But there's a lot of cool cats, including Steve Paikin, who are going to make an appearance at this May 12th home opener at Christie Pitts.
Very cool.
And I can tell you, I can't name a guy yet, but I can tell you that Rick Vive will be there. And I can tell you that Rick Emmett from Triumph is coming with Blair Packham. And I can tell you that Stephen Brunt is making the trip from Hamilton.
Oh, there you go. Then it is a big event.
It's now when you hear Brunt's going to be there, right? Speaking of smart people talking sports, there's you and there's Brunt. You're in the same club there. So come out to Christie Pitts and hang with me. I got my own section there. Again, it's a free event. And the official funeral home of the Toronto Maple Leafs baseball team, as announced last week on Toronto Mike, is Ridley Funeral Home. So There's a measuring tape for you to go along with your history book. That measuring tape is from Ridley Funeral Home. The book is from the Toronto Maple Leafs baseball team. This is new for April. That card there, and so you have a wireless speaker. So you, Bruce Dowbiggin, can listen to Season 6 of Yes, We Are Open, which is a fantastic award-winning podcast from Moneris, and it's hosted by FOTM Al Grego, who will be returning soon to kick out jams from Season 6. You ready for this? He just came back from Calgary, where he's been interviewing small business owners and sharing their stories in this wonderful podcast. So his most recent episode, which just dropped, is about Sal Howell and her staff at River Cafe on Prince's Island in downtown Calgary.
Fabulous place. If you've never been, it's a great restaurant, and it's right in the middle of the river, and that's where they hold the folk festival in the summer. Yeah, it's one of those things about Calgary that's surprising to people who come from away.
Okay, well, I was actually going to ask if you were familiar with the cafe, and I'm glad you are. So you can hear that story from Sal and Al.
Great wine list.
Sal and a great wine list, and a great duo here. Sal and Al. Season 6 has dropped, everybody. It's starting to drop. That's episode 1 from Season 6 of Yes, We Are Open, and I'd like to welcome back the good people at Moneris. Okay, you got a new book. Let's talk about the new book quickly here, and then I have some questions for you, and then I have topics I want to talk to you about.
All right.
It's easy to talk to you, and I got my eye over here, lots of time. Tell me about the new book that is not yet available, but coming very, very soon. It's called Deal With It. What's it going to be about?
It's the 6 greatest trades in NHL history, the ones that changed the business. My son, Evan, who works for TSN, we did a previous book, and it was called Inexact Science, and we did I think it was the 10 greatest drafts, or I should know this because I wrote the book. But anyhow, and it did quite well, and it's still getting lots of pubs. So we said, let's do something else. But this time the difference is we're self-publishing. We're going
so
that
can
route.
I understand? So you're paying to print the books, and then you're selling them directly, or how does it work?
The way it goes with Kindle, and maybe I'm missing something. The way it goes with Kindle
is digital.
Is you download your book, you create a cover, and they will print on demand. And thus you reach an agreement with them for how much it costs to print each book, what you'll get from it, what they'll get from it, their shipping and all that sort of stuff. So listen, again, we're not trying to get rich. We enjoy doing these things. My son runs Stats Center for TSN online. I know you see him there.
Yeah, follow him on Twitter.
He's a Rain man, so he's the one who tells me all the stuff that I'm getting wrong, and we get to correct it. And we start with the Phil Esposito trade, 1967 to the Orr Bruins. That makes the Bruins into the big bad Bruins, famous team. And we go from there. Obviously, the Gretzky trade. The Frank Mahovlich trade.
Does the Lindros trade make the cut here?
We didn't do it this time because we did a lot in the previous book, and I've written about it 3 times, and it's a hugely significant trade.
Chris Simon was in that trade. We just lost him, sadly.
Well, Chris was in with the Flames in 2004 when they almost won the cup. Anyhow,
and he did win a cup with the Avalanche.
Oh yeah, no. Not taking that away from him. He was a valuable part of Darryl Sutter's team. Anyhow, but so we do the Esposito trade. We do the Frank Mahovlich trades, plural, of course. Obviously.
Can I ask about one more? And again, I can't wait to read this thing. But is the Gilmore trade in there?
Oh yes. At length about Gilmore. And Gilmore, I think it's the only trade we put in there that didn't result in a Stanley Cup for the team he went to. Right. But living in Calgary the last 20 some odd years, I mean, that's a legendary, the fact that he was there when they won the Stanley Cup, the fact that he left under highly suspicious circumstances, Doug Risebrough. There's a great little story in which Frank Orr, you remember Frank Orr, used to write for the Star. He was standing there with Tom Watt, the coach of the Toronto Maple Leafs, and Watt is reading out the results of that trade between Calgary and Toronto. And at the end of the list, Frank sort of says in his style, Thomas, what else is on the list? And he says, that's it. That's all it is. And Frank Orr's eyebrows shoot up because it was larceny. It was clearly larceny. And I knew Doug in Calgary. I knew him, and obviously here in Toronto. I was covering him when he was here in Toronto. Nearly killed him with a golf ball once. And yeah, it's a fascinating trade because it allows us to talk about Cliff Fletcher and all sorts of other people, and then follow the progress of poor old Gary Lehman, who in your day was a hero. He was part of a team.
We scored 50 goals on a team. You know, I mentioned Rick Vive moments ago because Rick Vive is going to be at this May 12th Toronto Maple Leafs baseball game at Christie Pitts. And that was when, he scored 3 times. I think he scored 50. He was the first guy. It's funny because last night I watched Austin Matthews score 62, which is a franchise record. He's next. That guy's unbelievable. But yeah, Gary Lehman, rare Leaf to score 50.
I was there last night, actually. I watched the game last night.
Okay, you were there.
And left when it was 5-2.
Right, it was 5-1.
Well, the person I was with wanted to go home. He's a little older than me, and he wanted to go home.
Yeah, well, I mean, it was one nail biter.
Did it change at all? Did anything happen? Did I miss something?
When the opposition pulls that goalie with down 2 goals, you're like, okay, But I get flashbacks of that 4-1 collapse in Game 7 against the Bruins. I think it was 2013. Yeah. I'm trying to wipe it from my memory. But you're mentioning Gilmore not winning a cup with the Leafs, and then I got to wipe Game 7. What happened in Game 7 against the Kings?
Yeah. We do that in detail, and people forget that earlier in the game, the killer had high-sticked someone else and had not got a penalty. He had been given the discretion, and if you talk to Fraser, the referee, he admits he blew the call. He didn't get the call right, but he also mentions that he'd kind of given Doug a little bit of a free pass earlier in the game.
Well, don't let the facts get in the way of a great Toronto story. Okay?
Oh, it is a great.
Did I mention 2019 NBA champions?
People are so stigmatized here. And look, I was covering the Blue Jays those 2 years. They were the best team in baseball, maybe one of the best back-to-back World Series teams in the last quarter century. No, more than quarter century now, maybe 50 years even. You go back a little bit.
Well, thanks to Rob Butler.
Yeah, well, he was an integral part of making sure the bench didn't come off its hinges. And
he got a hit against Kurt Schilling in Game 5. He reminds me.
Not to tease him too much, but a friend of mine who was a bench warmer in the NHL said, "Oh yes, they told me that I was good in the room, so they left me there."
Someone's got to warm that bench there, but.
So, yeah, Gilmore's part of it, the Patrick Roy trade.
Of course.
But towards the end, we sort of changed the formula a little bit. We talk about how the Vegas Knights were built through just the trades and the creativity of what they did. And then the final one, of course, and you saw him last night, was, of course, Matthew Tkachuk. The Matthew Tkachuk and Goodrow escape from Calgary, which has devastated that team and that franchise. That's the last one we deal with.
Looking forward to it. So, can people pre-order it now? Like, when can people deal with it?
As far as I know, it's going to be available on Amazon the 15th of April. I'm trying to download
that's soon.
the manuscript into it, and it keeps telling me it doesn't fit or there's something.
Well, you're trying to upload it.
Upload. What did I say?
Download it. I'm here to be the pedantic asshole host
That's all right.
here. But,
Fewer and less. I'm one of those kind of people.
I produce Humble and Fred show, and forever they were saying nonsense. They were saying it was the most downloaded podcast in the country, and then I would just privately, like, you know, that claim is funny and all, but it's not even close to being true. And then I said, I said to them, you know what, you really are. And I said, until I'm proven wrong, I believe this to be true. I said, you are the most uploaded podcast in Canadian music, because they had been many years doing it daily, and then they got more episodes than I do because I'm catching up. But they still
they still keep you around. You say those.
They still keep, yeah.
But
then they started using it. Like Howard would say that instead, because at least that was something I believe to be true, which is that Humble and Fred, the most uploaded podcast in
good for them
in Canadian podcasting history. Yeah, and until somebody points out one that's got more, I'm gonna keep rolling with that. But you were on that show very recently.
Yeah,
that's always fun because Fred reads your blog. Remind people how they can read your controversial blog that gets Fred quite riled up.
I have a website. It's called Not the Public Broadcaster, for people who still think I'm a CBC guy. In case they're I have to disabuse.
Well, that
them
means they don't listen to Toronto Mike if they think
true.
that.
And on Mondays I do a sports column. This week it's about the Shohei and gambling.
We're going to get into that.
Telling people about that. And on Wednesday, Thursdays, it's culture and politics. And most of the time now it centers on the media and my former business and the issues with that.
Well, okay, let's...
that's what gets Fred's eyes popping.
So Fred, and we always have the conversations, because I'm a big advocate for Bruce Dowbiggin, believe it or not, okay, and I'm always like, he's smart. I see he's not like, he's not one of those guys who's going to yell. They had Chris Sky on the show because they wanted to talk to this guy, Chris Sky, who became kind of notorious during the anti-lockdown demonstrations and stuff. And all this Chris Sky did was kind of like yell over them and tell them that like he got them and owned them or something. There was no conversation at all. Like it was like, okay, he's just whatever. He just wants to be yelling on your show or whatever. But I said with Bruce, I said he's calm, he's cool, he's going to articulately explain why he thinks what he thinks, and you're going to have a civil discussion. So you're the kind of guy that I said Fred, Humble and Fred can talk to without it erupting into some Chris Sky noise or whatever, and once in a while they let me book you.
Yeah,
so there you go.
My logo used to be, or my sort of calling used to be, I give good panel. I give good panel. I love doing panel shows. Grew up watching them, and I hosted many of them, so I also know what the host wants. And now when I go on, I try not to direct the show. I let the host do it himself.
Right, that's the hardest
occasionally
part.
I walk all over the people. That's my
when I introduce my new series, my Crossfire, you're going to be my right winger I bring on the panel. So Bruce, wait for that call. But there was a question that came in. So
does it pay?
Yeah. Well, I'm going to do the math real quick. Okay, you got the speaker.
Yeah.
You got the book. That book, you buy it online for like $45. You got the speaker. You got the fresh craft beer. You got the lasagna. You've got hundreds of dollars worth of swag, and you got that very expensive measuring tape from Ridley Funeral Home. Okay, you've done well for yourself. I'm looking at this. I'm jealous.
I'm humbled.
You did
humbled.
quite well.
But I have to. My wife reminds me I've got to stop working for nothing, because I do. People call me up. And I did something from Pittsburgh the other day. We're driving through New York State, and I stopped the car to do a thing with John Steigerwald in Pittsburgh, and my wife says, "Why are you doing all this stuff for free?"
Well, do you enjoy it?
Of course I enjoy it.
That's why.
Why else would I pull over
You're
the side of the road?
You're a 70-year-old man, Bruce. Okay, you only live once.
In upstate New York to talk to a guy in Pittsburgh about God only knows what.
Home of Joe Flaherty, gone at 82. My goodness gracious. Okay, so this question came in from. I'm going to protect his identity, so I'm just going to call him Mike. He is a Mike. Okay, that's your clue. This is a Mike, and he's in the media. Let's call him Media Mike, okay? Not me, by the way, if people think. I would take ownership of my questions. Okay. If Bruce Dowbiggin is so anti-Oscar, anti-Hollywood, why is he watching? So there's a question he had specifically about, has he watched the 5 Best Supporting Actor nominees before he criticizes Robert Downey Jr.? I don't even know exactly what we're referring to. I don't know if this is on social media or on your blog, but maybe you had a take on Robert Downey Jr. winning Best Supporting Actor. How did you feel about that award?
I thought his performance was fantastic. I thought he was good.
So did you say anything negative about it or criticize it?
Well, what I said was he was the favorite because in Hollywood, overcoming a drug addiction is seen as some sort of sanctified thing, and it puts you, everybody in Hollywood seems to be in rehab from something, and the fact that he rehabbed himself and then did this fantastic performance, there was no way he was going to lose. There was no way. And so I was pointing out that I never had any doubt.
Okay, you had no doubt, but that's different than saying he only won because he's a recovering
I don't
alcoholic.
think I said it only won. I hardly at all. I said it was a slam dunk he was going to win.
You didn't know we were going to be talking Hollywood and Oscar talk here.
I didn't listen to it live per se. I was in the next room. My wife watches it religiously, and she calls me in on the points that I'm supposed to hear about, and then I read about them, and I get the transcripts. Anyhow, whatever.
No, very interesting. So thank you, Media Mike. Just wanted to know if you're why you were watching, if you're anti-Oscar. But it sounds like your wife is watching, and you're sort of catching on to parts here and there. But what did you think of Oppenheimer? I personally, this is my hot take here on we're on Siskel and Ebert now. I thought it was a fine movie. I just didn't think it was as good as the awards it won and the buzz it got. There were a few movies I preferred in 2023. But what was your take on Oppenheimer?
I'm really glad they made a movie like that they will still make a movie like that. 3 hours of pretty much indulgent stuff, really, about a subject which most people are not really keen on. I was really pleased, and I enjoyed it for what it was. It's 2 hours of making a bomb, and then 1 hour of the House on Un-American Hearings Committee, whatever, HUAC, and the chasing of communists after the war, and using Oppenheimer as that. A little showbiz story. My younger son Reese used to work in the film business, and one of his jobs when he was at Cannes was shepherding Cillian Murphy around.
Wow.
Yep, he knows Cillian, says he's a wonderful guy. I think Reese even sent him a note afterwards congratulating him, and he said Cillian sent him a response.
Well, that's everything, right? Because a lot of people you can text, but when you get that text back, that's next level there.
But I thought the performance, Downey's performance was fantastic. He's become such a good actor, and he doesn't look like all of the bump around him is impressing him anymore. I think for a while that was important to him, that he be one of those people, and now I don't think he cares. He's knows who he is. He did a documentary about him and his father when his father was dying, and it's an interesting documentary. But I like him, and I even like Matt Damon. That was a role that Matt Damon was good at. Sometimes he does roles he's not good at, but that one he was really, really good for, I thought.
Absolutely. And Cillian Murphy, you mentioned, a favorite of Christopher Nolan. I think the phone will ring when Christopher Nolan makes a new movie. Cillian's usually offered.
He calls me Christopher Nolan. I'll be in this movie too. He's fantastic.
And I think you have to be Christopher Nolan to be given that budget for that kind of a movie in 2023. So yeah, I am glad they're still making movies like that too. All my favorite movies.
Which was your favorite this year of the ones that were nominated?
I think it was Past Lives. Like I really liked The Holdovers as well. I was a big, but these movies and there was the other one I quite liked. I'm trying to remember the name of it. The one about World War II, the Auschwitz.
Oh, yes.
Why am I struggling? What's wrong with me?
The guy who plays Rudolf Haas, the guy who ran Auschwitz.
The name will come back to me. I could Google it, but then I'd have to leave the combo. Right. But bottom line is, and the other one I liked is the Emma Stone one. I quite liked too. Like there were a bunch of movies I liked and that I put ahead of Oppenheimer. But Oppenheimer was a fine movie. The one I didn't like, and I feel like I missed it. I maybe need to revisit it because I seem to be the only one who didn't care for it. Is Barbie? I watched it very carefully with people I adore and ready to love it, and I thought it was. I didn't think it was very good, and I was shocked that people deemed it, Oscar worthy. But what do I know about film? I'm no Gene Siskel.
I think a 70-year-old white man to assess Barbie would be just wasting everyone's time. I appreciate it for what it was. My daughter and my wife both loved it for what it was, the empowerment message. I liked Ryan Reynolds does a dance thing in it, does he?
I think it's Ryan Gosling. I think you're confusing your Canadian Ryans.
I get them always mixed up.
Your handsome Ryans.
I do like Gosling, but yeah.
I think most of the Kens were played by Canadians, if not all of them, right? Because the guy from Kim's Convenience, and then you had Michael Cera was a Ken, like in addition to Ron. I feel they were all Canadian. The Kens were all Canadian.
Was Zach Eady? Did he play one of
By the way, that's the Final Four you're talking there, and that's Purdue Boilermakers, one of my favorite nicknames in NCAA play. And Zach Eady, 7'4". My son and I had a debate the other day. How will he be a good NBA player? I think you can't teach height. He's 7'4", and I've been watching him pretty closely. He's got a good touch with the ball. I think he will be a great NBA player. Do you have any thoughts on Zach Eady's NBA? You have no take on the Zach Eady NBA.
The pride of Leaside.
Yeah.
From Leaside.
Leaside.
I was listening to Dan Patrick's show coming over because I listen to everybody. And Patrick and his guest didn't think he was going to be a great NBA player, mostly because he doesn't play the NBA style. He plays a low post.
Right. No threes coming out of him.
Yeah.
Right?
And as you may have noticed, he scored 40 points, but he gassed 5 of his 6 free throws in the last 2 minutes.
But I noticed just watching him mainly in the tournament here, March Madness, that he does hit he's not a Shaq, right? Like he does hit. Yeah, you can play hack a Zach instead of hack a Shaq, but he does hit his free throws. Like there were a few down the stretch he missed, of course. But
the thing that I'm most interested about him for, and I spent a lot of time this winter at 3 a.m. watching the Canadian men's basketball team playing in the World Championships. I'm really interested to see if they can somehow get Edie on the team for the Olympics this summer in Paris. I think I don't know how much he could do, but he might have a contribution. And anybody who's 7'4", you can put him out there when you need a rebound, right? So I'm hopeful for him.
Yeah, he's one of those guys where I don't think he leaves the ground when he dunks.
No.
But yeah, that'll be interesting to see if he can make the. I'll be watching that.
Because I thought he'd be a first rounder, but the people on the Patrick show said maybe a second rounder.
This is where I'm out to lunch too, because I thought I was thinking Raptors, right? So I'm thinking, Raptors are. I think they're going to be 6th or whatever. They're going to be a lottery pick, but it'll be a late lottery, whatever. And I'm like, he should still be there.
Oh, he will.
Okay, yeah, he will be there. But my son was telling me, but and then I'm like, I really am not a basketball analyst. Like, I really don't know what I'm doing, because I would be like, he's a hometown guy, 7'4", 2-time NCAA Player of the Year. Maybe on his way to winning the NCAA championship this year, and still gonna be a second rounder. So what do I know?
They were talking about this seriously, because also the kid from NC State, I call him the buffet. He's a little chunky, but anyhow, they were talking about him, but also maybe about Edie. And you know what? Maybe they could go and play offensive tackle in the NFL.
Right.
They got the good feet. They got the big wingspan, which is of course what you want. And I thought, well, there you go.
I feel like Dave Winfield was the guy who was drafted by 4 different. I know
sports. Yeah.
2 football or 2 basketball. NFL and definitely baseball.
Yeah, no hockey. He just a great Dave Winfield story.
Yeah.
Back in '92, the first of the World Series years, the Blue Jays, as you remember, kept staggering. There were character flaws in the team up until then, and there were guys who were fundamentally not serious people, and that's one of the reasons that they lost. In any event, they went and got Dave Winfield because Winfield was a winner, and they felt he'd be good in the clubhouse, and I was kind of skeptical about it. So anyway, we go down to Dunedin, and my producers say, could you please get Dave Winfield for a one-on-one outside in the sunshine, the hot sunshine, to talk with us live in Toronto? I said, okay, sure. And you're always trepidatious when you went in to see people. Hey, Dave, could you do it? Oh, yeah, no problem. He comes out, we put the mic on him, we get the whole thing, and then I get the death sentence in my ear. Sorry, delay 15 minutes. Can you tell Dave Winfield 15 minutes? I'm going like, Dave Winfield, 15 minutes? This guy, he is what he is.
Yeah.
So I went to him and I said, Dave, I got a problem. We need another 15 minutes. He says, that's all right. I'll just read the newspaper. And I thought, but I thought, now you've got a guy in the dressing room who understands what it's about, not just the baseball part, but a guy who understands how to deal with media and stuff. And I think he really helped the team that year for that reason. And the next year, Paul Molitor was the same kind of guy. And there's a digression about Dave Winfield.
No, anytime. I will let people know I'm going to be broadcasting live from the Joe Carter Classic, since we're talking 92, 93 Blue Jay action here. So I'm told by Rod Black that I'll have an audience with Joe Carter.
There you
That's the promise he's made to me. So because he's got me setting up there at 7:30 in the morning. So if I'm there and all I have is Rod Black, I'm gonna be pissed. But I'm like, I got up at 6 fucking in the morning for Rod Black. I'm like, sorry, no, I was promised to touch them all, Joe.
I was gonna say, will you have to touch all 18 holes as part of it? Part of this thing. Touch them all.
Yes. Oh, and I'm also told, not promised, but told I might get, and I don't even know yet what I'll talk to him about. I'll just talk about Ace Ventura maybe, but Dan Marino apparently is going to be there. Could you imagine? Dan Marino, FOTM, Dan Marino. By the way, in the live stream, Canada Kev's son played against Zach Edey in baseball back when they were like 13 years old, and parents had documentation to prove that he was actually age eligible, because if you can imagine. And he was so big. Tall, it took him too long to bend down and get a ground ball through his legs. Like it's like Zach Edey's got to bend down and get a ground ball. Give him a couple of minutes here. Okay, so What the hell? What the hell were we just? What were we just talking about? We were talking about. Dave Winfield. So Dave Winfield wants noise. Who are those players that you were telling me there were kind of immature or whatever and weren't about winning? Can you tell me who they were?
George Bell, Dave Winfield, Dave Steeb.
These are my heroes, Okay, I got to keep notes here.
Kelly Gruber.
Who was a key part of that 92 team? Kelly Gruber, right? Because
he played third base, but
I feel like he was
Kelly
a main
was living at large.
I've heard a lot. I mean, Kelly Gruber. I mean, we talked about this the other day I think it was with Rod Black, that obviously Roberto Alomar is banned from baseball. Like you won't see Roberto Alomar in any Blue Jays sanction. He's gone. But the other guy who's not banned from MLB baseball, but is like soft banned in that he's not invited anymore to these reunions and stuff, is Kelly Gruber.
Yeah,
he's not invited to like a 92 reunion show. So
he didn't leave a good taste in people's mouths at the Blue Jay organization, and I think he's sort of turned his life around. I think the last I heard is he's become a Christian and he's leading an upright life. But yeah, people
like Weezer's like he's cleaned up, found Jesus.
That's right. Well, a lot of them do. Believe me, when you retire and there's nothing left, all of a sudden Jesus seems like a good alternative. He'll talk to you.
I wonder if there's like if he cleans himself up and he's sober and he's regretful. I wonder if he's a guy. I feel there's a redemption story there. Like we're a forgiving people. And we're not told what Alomar did. We're just told that it's such that you would agree as well that he should be banned, right? So it's like just trust us. He should be banned. But Kelly Gruber, there is room for redemption and a comeback there, right?
I'll tell you one of my stories about the Blue Jays' attitude. In those days, again, trying to get Dave Steeb for an interview or to cooperate or whatever, it was just pulling teeth. And Dave was about Dave, etc. Okay, well, you're the best pitcher in the American League or most of the time. Yeah. Good, go for it. He leaves Toronto, and if you remember, he came back for a cup of coffee at the very end.
Of course I do, yeah. Like 40 in his early 40s or something.
Yeah, so I'm on the sidelines with my camera crew, and we're waiting for somebody, I can't even remember who it was, who doesn't show. And I'm expressing my disappointment to the camera guy about what am I going to do? I've got a 3-minute hit. I need somebody live. And Dave Steeb overhears me and comes over and says, oh, I'll come on with you. And I said, Dave, all those years that I came to you and asked you for just 2 minutes of your time, and you made me look like my fly was down, you're the last guy I'm going to interview. And it was one of the few times I ever had revenge on an athlete.
No, good for you, because I did hear he came back kinder, gentler, more media-friendly.
Well, he was then, sure.
He was humbled, right?
Sure, he didn't have his slider
coming out
anymore.
of the bullpen, yeah.
He didn't have his slider.
Because I co-hosted a show with Mark Hebscher for 5 years, and I've heard the stories of how Dave Steeb was treating you guys in the media.
Oh, yeah.
But here's a guy who I did quite like.
Hi, I'm George Bell. You listen to Toronto Mike.
There you go. Okay, so the immature guys were the Steves and the Bells, and then you replace them with guys like I suppose like a Joe Carter, right? A Joe Carter comes in with that big trade in whatever that was, 91 or whatever.
He and Alomar together.
Yeah, together from San Diego for Fred McGriff and Tony Fernandez.
Yeah, that made them
Put that in your book, Bruce.
Yeah, real. No, they're just, it's a hockey book story. I'd love to do a baseball
details.
trade.
Why are you so keen on these details? Okay, that's the trade I want to read about in that book.
But they were an interesting. They were a fun team, and I think, Toronto people hate to hear this, and it was the same in Montreal, but a lot of the ball players just didn't take being in Canada seriously. They just felt like they were in Siberia, that they weren't around their peeps, they weren't around things they were familiar with.
What's this metric system? Why can't I get ESPN?
Just hating going through the border. The whole thing with passports, it just for a lot of them it was hard to get their heads around. And George was a fun-loving guy, but he used to, every time he'd hit a home run in batting practice, he'd shout out a word in Spanish which refers to a part of the female anatomy, and he was just not clued in about some things that he should be doing, right? And when you got people in the dressing room who had won and who knew how to win and knew how to do the whole thing, George was irrelevant, and he kind of moved out the side door.
I'm glad Dave Winfield got the game-winning RBI in that 12th inning in Atlanta.
Yeah, good man. We were all, another story from that game, we were all down there live, of course, and they had all the camera crews, and we were behind the fence in right field. And, of course, you remember the Blue Jays had the lead, and then they blew it. And all of a sudden, we're standing there. What are we doing? We're going to extra innings. And for the entire extra innings, there were about 20 TV crews there, because in those days, the locals sent their people. There were about 20 crews there waiting for this thing to be resolved. And finally, of course, last out, they make the out.
Otis Nixon drops a bunt.
Otis Nixon, where was he last night to break up the no-hitter? Come on. Anyhow,
That's the 8th time the Jays have been no-hit. And and in his career, Nolan Ryan no-hit other teams seven times. So it took that long for the Jays to pass Nolan Ryan.
I think he had a couple of perfect games in there, Nolan Ryan. In any event, they finally get the final out. The doors open in right field, and it's kind of like the land rush in Oklahoma. All of these crews, and there's a few people there who shouldn't be running, carrying cameras. And we sprint to the infield, and they're all jumping up and down. If you look at the video, you might see the CBC mic flash in there.
Okay, I'll check that out. What I like is that they had Joe Carter playing first base for that bottom inning, right? Typically, that would be John Alderud on first base. So when you think about, because Joe catches the ball from Timlin, and he starts doing the jump, the Joe jump, right? He's jumping up. Amazing moment, right? First World Series for a team outside the USA. And imagine John Alderud. He makes that catch from Timlin, and he kind of maybe shakes his fist a little bit, like he would just kind of smile and shake his fist. He
was subdued.
He was so subdued. Yeah. What a hitter, though. What a batting swing he had. What a sweet swing.
Head control. I would be really interested if Olerud came up today with the Shohei sort of example, whether they let him pitch and play at the same time, because Olerud was a really top collegiate pitcher. In those days, they wouldn't let him.
What about Dave Stieb? He was drafted as an outfielder.
I don't know that he hit well enough. Right. I mean, there's some guys that they're bad infielders, and then all of a sudden they find out they can throw, and they're pitchers.
Okay, you mentioned Shohei Ohtani. So I'm reminded of TMLX 14, which took place the day after the ghost flight of Shohei Ohtani to Toronto to announce he had signed with the Blue Jays. Okay, this never happened. But I remember Stephen Brunt was at TMLX 14 to open up, and we were recording, and we were just talking about that crazy day of like misinformation flying around, and how, once I can't remember the gentleman's name, but once the gentleman who had some integrity as a sports reporter tweeted that Ohtani was on his way to Toronto, we all kind of bit in, and then another guy, Adam Seaborn, talked about Rogers was going to have a 4 p.m. Press conference, and then we had this rumor about Kikuchi had reserved a Japanese restaurant for 50 or something in downtown Toronto, and all the pieces were coming together. Ohtani chose to play for the Toronto Blue Jays. Let's talk about this current.
Not a great moment for Toronto journalists.
No, well, yeah. And, that's the other thing, too. The Fan 590 decided an unscheduled Blue Jay show with like Barker and Blair, which was unscheduled, but basically tapping into this ridiculous buzz about Ohtani on his way to the Blue Jays. Like, so that fed the whole thing, too. Like, okay, whoa, wow, like, they must know, because of course they know it's the same damn mothership, right? They're all working for the same
Supposed
people.
To.
Yeah, no Blue Jay stories are ever broken by Sportsnet journalists. Have you noticed that?
Yeah, it's like the number of CBC stories that have been broken out of Washington. They have people there all the time, but funnily enough, it just sounds like they're reading the LA Times or the Washington Post editorial that day. But yeah, I digress.
You digress. Okay, talk to me about.
But I was in Florida when all the Ohtani stuff was coming down. No, the Ohtani stuff was coming down. Okay. This time with the Blue Jays, and my next door neighbor in Florida works for MLB, and people in MLB. Did they laugh? They laughed till they cried about Toronto thinking they were going to get Ohtani. Everyone knew he was going to the Dodgers.
I'm a pretty skeptical guy, but when all the pieces, and I saw, and I'll Google his name, but the guy who tweeted, he wasn't just some guy like me in his basement, okay? He was a well-connected, he was a guy Sportsnet would put on as an MLB insider. Like, he had some weight behind him. When he did the tweet, I said, oh, this is happening, because they were tracking a flight, right? It was one of the Dragons.
Right. Yes. No. It did.
Robert Horskovic.
Oh, Horskovic. Yes. No, it wasn't going to happen. The people in Major League Baseball knew he was going to L.A. because he was going to ask for $700 million, and it would have been the biggest mistake the Blue Jays ever made if they did it. So we should be happy, if you're a Blue Jay fan, that this didn't come to pass, and not only for the $700 million, but what has happened since.
Well, let's talk about that, okay? Because you just wrote on your blog about sports betting and sports and the blurring of the lines. So let's talk about Shohei Ohtani. And then let's bring up Raptors superstar Jonte Porter, who I didn't really realize. I've kind of unplugged from them this season because it's terrible to watch. And I did not know that name when this story broke. So talk to me.
Well, see, I've been sports betting for, I'd say about 25 years. I used to bet with a guy named Harry that was here in Toronto. And he would show up on Sunday at your door with a little piece of paper and a pencil and take down your bets. And he used to have a trunk full of irons or other things that were hot that he was also marketing. So things have come a long way from when I first started getting into it.
Right.
But I've used the offshore sites for a long time here, like Pinnacle and Bodog and those kind of people. So I kind of, and there's a station out of Vegas called VSiN, the Vegas Sports and Information Network. It was set up by Brent Musburger. So I listen to these people a lot, and I've learned a lot mostly about money management when it comes to betting and all that stuff. And as soon as I heard the Porter stuff, I'm going like, whoa, hang on a second.
Yeah. This
is a sleepy night in betting, and the biggest thing on the board is a guy who's a bench warmer for the for the Raptors.
Right.
And we're talking about a guy who I think it was the under on threes, and it was a small number. And all of a sudden, everybody was maxed out. The word was out on this thing.
Right.
And that's when your bullshit meter comes out and said, no, something's going on. Now, whether
something smells.
He orchestrated it or not. And of course, I think, was that the one where he pulled out because he had a sore eye, or was that the one because he had a sore elbow? I can't remember. He's been in the habit of pulling himself out of games. And that just... None of it goes together, as it doesn't with the Ohtani thing too. The Ohtani thing just stinks. If you know betting and how it works, there's no booking. Now, for people who don't follow the story, the guy who was handling the action is out of California. There's no legalized betting in California. So this guy is the equivalent of my friend Harry, who did stuff out of his trunk,
right,
but just a little more sophisticated with a computer. There's no way he's advancing any kind of credit to it.
But it's his translator, right? So I mean,
to a guy who's a translator,
right?
And unless he knows that it's backed up by Ohtani money, so somebody somewhere,
we're talking millions of dollars.
Oh well, he ends up 4.5 million owing. He's probably won about 4 million, but lost 4.5 million. That's how these things go. You think you're just about ahead, and you just keep going, and next thing you know, they're coming and breaking your ankles. But there's no way the guy gave that money to them. The second thing about it would be is somebody in Ohtani's organization, and I can believe a guy who just signed a $700 million contract might not notice everything that is wired out by his bank. But I can promise you somebody who's handling his accounting and stuff has been alerted to the fact that a sequence of $500,000 transfers are going to some guy in California, and that your hackles would come up. Now, did they protect him, not tell him? Did he consciously not hear? But somebody knew what was going on. Someone
knows something there. There's got to be alerts, right? Like, this is a pro tip for everybody making, almost $100 million or whatever. You got to have alerts, like when the wire transfer exceeds X, maybe send a text or something.
Well, I know this happens to you all the time when you go and transfer $500,000 all the time. If you transfer more than $10,000, the banks are very interested in you. They want to know what's going on. And the fact that he's doing $500,000 transfers.
I can tell you, I got a couple of kids in university, and once in a while, let's say a number like, I'll need $5,000 for tuition or whatever. And I will email transfer the $5,000. And then I'll be quickly reminded, that exceeds your maximum. You're not allowed. Like, I have to literally say, okay, it's going to come in over a couple of days. Every 24 hours, it resets that limit.
Did you tell him that Ohtani was backing you? Maybe that would help. The other thing about the Ohtani thing. Sorry to
Then I have questions about the Ohtani thing.
Well, the other thing, and the biggest thing about it that nobody's talking about, is that the translator was his employee.
Right.
For 4 or 5 years, however long he was with California, that employee was in the dressing room, the inner sanctum of a team. Who would have seen who was hurt? He would have known who had had a fight with his wife. Right. He'd have known all this stuff. Plus, the guy, everybody knows this guy is enlarged to the gambling people. He'd have been could have sprung information out of him like instantly. So if Major League Baseball sort of washes this away, I'm going to, again, a big bullshit meter on this thing. This guy was in trouble, and I'm sure he sold information from time to time to get himself off the hook.
Wow, it smells. Now. Okay, so at this point, right, there's no evidence that there's any sports betting on baseball. Am I right about that? Do you have that? We don't know, I guess, at this point. But my understanding was that sports betting, but not baseball? Because that's the third rail, right?
Well, my
It's
understanding is that there was no betting on the Angels.
Okay.
But then, of course, because people do this type of work, somebody was basically charting the games that Ohtani had pitched in, and there were big blips in Japan on those games.
Wow.
And every one of those games over the course of about a year, Ohtani had a bad performance, either at bat or pitching. And it could be strictly coincidental, and if it is, God bless him, but the connection of people putting a lot of money on single games, and then all of a sudden Ohtani not playing well, and now we know his translator is a guy who his translator is the Janet Gretzky, really, of this story. You remember Janet Gretzky?
Of course.
Terrible.
Rick Tocchet was involved in this, right?
Rick Tocchet and Janet Gretzky, apparently recidivist gamblers. Wayne never touched gambling. That's why the minute it became
Although I see him on TV touting gambling all the
I was
time.
going to say, the minute it became legal, he becomes the gambling face of I think it's MGM casinos. It's just, it was hysterical. The way that story was treated here in Canada, protecting Gretzky's ass, we can't have the great man be brought down about gambling, etc. And the fact that he let his wife take all that stuff is just, and then she complained. She said, "What do you people want from me?" I'm going like, your husband's the greatest hockey player ever, and there's betting going on. Sorry.
No, don't be sorry. I want to talk about this because Shohei Ohtani's translator, who is implicated in this whole thing, if the story is told that the translator did steal this money from Ohtani, like he didn't know this money was going to pay out bookies, as much as that smells, but if that's the story and there's zero evidence that Ohtani did any sports betting, they can kind of, like, this is their unicorn, right? Like this isn't Jonte Porter.
No. Oh, it is not. It was his money. It was his money that was involved in the betting, and you can go up and down about it was stolen or it was misappropriated.
Say it ain't so, show. Like you can't. You know what I mean? Like this is the unicorn.
Touch them all, show.
Touch them all, show.
I mean, it's just his money. There's so many things here that have to be done. Now, I will say this, in Japanese culture, what I understand about it, this guy he's right up there with the emperor in terms of popularity. And everything will be done culturally and business-wise to protect him and to make sure that the translator is the one who falls on the sword for this thing. So I don't underestimate that the Japanese protecting Shohei will be a big factor in this.
Okay, so we got to clean up a little bit here, which is that it's John Morosi. That was the guy who sent the tweet that I bid on, and it wasn't an April Fool's Day joke. He was just
John's
wrong.
usually good.
Yeah, that's why I believed it, because I have a pretty good sniff test of who am I going to believe on Twitter, right? It's like I believed the tweet that Ohtani was on his way to Toronto, and then when you added the other parts, because I'm not going to believe Adam Seaborn. He doesn't have a reputation for breaking stories, and he's now retired from breaking news because he's 0 for 1 and he's going to stick to what he's good at, which is reporting like TV ratings and things like that. Yeah. But Morosi was the one who tweeted, so we mopped that up. Canada Kev on the live stream points out that Pete Rose wishes he had a translator back in the days. So tell me what you think's going to happen here with MLB and this investigation, and then also Pete Rose. Like, if they sort of does this affect his lifetime? I just mentioned the holdovers. You know who's great in the holdovers?
Pete Rose.
Paul Giamatti. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Amazing.
Father was the commissioner.
Right. Son of Bart Giamatti, who is the guy who banned Pete Rose from baseball.
And many people feel the stress of the investigation that Bart Giamatti was the one who launched it. The stress of it caused the heart attack that killed him.
That's what I hear. And it was a heart attack. So see how it's all connected here? You never know where a conversation with Bruce
Degrees
Dowbiggin.
Of Paul Giamatti,
who is it? Keith Stein was telling me he likes listening to Toronto Mike because suddenly all these pieces all tie together at some point. Like it's like an episode of Seinfeld, right? There's all these B story, and at some point they're all going to converge or whatever. The sea was angry that day, my friends.
I watched the opera episode yesterday, which is with the guy who dresses up as Rigoletto. It's quite fun.
I quite like Seinfeld, and I've been thinking about how they're going to end Curb Your Enthusiasm because they, out of nowhere, I don't know if it was episode 2 or 3, but out of nowhere, somebody was asking Larry David, like, were you writing for Seinfeld at the end or something? And he mentions that, no, he was gone for the last couple of years, but he came back to write the finale. Like, this is just information just thrown out there. It doesn't tie to anything. They kind of let it sit there and then they move on. Like, it's just to remind the listeners that Larry David wrote the finale to Seinfeld, and it's sitting there. So it's got to come into play at some point, and we're pretty close to. I don't know if you watch Curb. Do you watch Curb?
Oh, yeah.
So it's coming soon. I
felt badly watching the Richard Lewis episode the other night.
It's like a corpse.
Yeah, well, and he's pretty sick when he's doing that. But God bless him. He's a trooper. He's out there. He's doing the thing. And the people they bring in, the new people that they brought into the series.
Vince Vaughn does a good job.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're just everybody's. I think, who is it that's one of the sports guys? I think it's Rich Eisen who's been on it. And Rich Eisen talks a little bit about the show and hanging out with Larry David on his podcast and talks about it. I think Dan Patrick is friends with Adam Sandler. And so he's been talking about the remake of Happy Gilmore. And he said, and here we're digressing again, but he said that Bob Barker's only condition for doing that role in Happy Gilmore was that he got to win the fight.
Love it.
He insisted he had to win the fight.
I believe Joe Flaherty's in that movie as a heckler.
It might be.
I think so.
There's so many people.
See, it's all coming back to Joe there. Shout out to Ridley Funeral Home.
But one thing about that. One thing about the Rose story.
Yeah, I'm going to wrap up the show, hey Todd, because I want to know what you think's going to come down here. It stinks. There's something rotten in the state of Denmark, and it's the biggest player maybe ever.
He's Babe Ruth.
He's Babe Ruth. If Babe Ruth didn't stop pitching when he was traded to the sold to the Yankees or whatever, Babe Ruth didn't pitch for the Yankees.
It's hard to say how important he is to the business and how important it is that they somehow get him through all of this sort of thing. The Pete Rose stuff that I never sympathized with Pete because of course I covered him a little bit and he liked amphetamines and stuff, so he was always just a little agitated when you dealt with him. But the fact is, every day when you would go into a dressing room, major league dressing room, there's a sign there.
Yeah.
It says no betting on baseball. He saw that sign for 30 years and ignored it, and then had the temerity to complain about being held to account for it. But all he had to do, maybe 5 to 10 years in, was to apologize and say,
right,
I was doing amphetamines and now I've cleaned up my act.
Right.
But Pete hasn't changed his act.
Right.
He goes and sells baseball bats with this autograph on them and all that stuff. He hasn't changed. And that's one of the reasons they haven't put him in. Everything will be done for Ohtani because he's been a good soldier otherwise. He's been wholesome. He's done the things that you wanted him to do. He hits home runs and he pitches. You couldn't design a better person, but there's some serious questions about just what was going on. And all of the sports now, and this friend of mine who's the MLB guy, one of the things he's doing right now, he's working on the virtual strike zone in the minor leagues. They've got the umpires down there.
Right, robo-umps.
Yeah, well, and what is it? I forget. There's an acronym for it. But anyhow, within an eighth of a second, you get the call in your ear and it tells you ball or strike or whatever. One of the reasons they have to do this now is because they're taking so much money from gambling. You have to protect the integrity of the outcome. If there's, NFL games that are decided by bad flags, it's a disaster for them to try to, you go and tell a casino, hey, by the way, you can't trust our results. Same thing in baseball, same thing in hockey. This is why the video has become so important. We've got to get it right.
Got to get it right. So, any predictions? What happens with Shohei? You think the translator takes the fall and Shohei somehow comes out unscathed? Is that what's your prediction?
It'll depend on how hard the media pushes, and there's a lot of people in the media who don't want to push this too far. Baseball has the most loyal reporter base that there is. There are guys who've been around since they put stitches on the baseball who are still voting for the Hall of Fame and stuff.
Right.
So I don't think that that there'll be a big push from some people in the media. But if enough high profile people keep this thing going, it'll be tough. If it's on 60 Minutes one of these weeks, they got a problem.
So you got the problem of Shohei, and we talked about the Raptors player, Jonte Porter. And since he's not Ohtani, he's toast, right? This guy's done.
I can't... Well, I mean, there's no evidence yet that he bet himself. What seems to be the allegation, I repeat, allegation.
Sure, of course.
Is that he knowingly did things that he knew would help other people maybe in terms of betting. And that's going to be...
I'm not even sure
tough.
what's the difference, right? Like if you're... letting a betting line affect your play in game, that's third rail stuff.
You're like the guy who buys the gun for the murderer. You know, I mean that's your attachment to it. There's no escaping it. Again, these are all allegations. I'll give him a chance to defend himself. I haven't heard much from his side of the story yet. His brother says he's a swell guy, whatever that means. That's what brothers are for, to tell people you're swell. But I just find it difficult to see him getting out of this, wriggling out of this. And he'd be an easy guy to throw to the side and say, "See, look at how vigilant we are." Because, and this is in my column on Not the Public Broadcaster on Monday. I don't like Mondays as the column. Is that public betting, legalized betting, allows you to see stuff. What do they say? Sunshine is the greatest disinfectant.
Yes.
The fact that you can see these things in the public and see when the numbers go up and see where the public is going, etc. It helps to a certain extent. In the past, the mob ran things. They weren't going to tell you what was going on. They weren't going to help you out. They weren't going to go to the police and say, "Hey, by the way, we think this guy in the Raptors is doing X, Y, and Z." But now we could see that. So I think to a certain extent, legalized gambling can help in that regard and prevent people from being able to fix a sport. But, you know, the prop bets are really difficult because that's just one guy and just his performance.
Yeah.
Only one, let's say a baseball pitcher, a hockey goalie, a quarterback, they're the only ones who can affect a game result. Really, if you're bribing, that's who you'd go after. But if you're doing
Prop
props,
bets, right.
props are easy. I love doing props. but yeah, you sit there and say, "Throw it to him one more time. Throw it to him, please."
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Now, you mentioned Porter buying the gun, and then you your column there, your blog is called "I Don't Like Mondays," which of course is a line from the Boomtown Rats song about the woman the young lady who shot up the school. Did she shoot the school? And then she said she doesn't like Mondays.
Yeah, they asked her why she didn't. She said, "I don't like Mondays."
Right.
Great song.
Absolutely. It's the best song Bob Geldof ever wrote there. So
Bob Geldof, by the way, I don't know if you've seen this, but they've done a release of the filming of We Are the World. Was it?
No, it was Do They Know It's Christmas?
No, that's the British
okay,
one.
yeah, but that was his. Okay, I see.
So they're doing the American one, right? It's Michael
And
Jackson
Netflix,
and Lionel Richie and all these people. And there's a great scene in which Michael Jackson and a couple of other guys are going, "Well, we should do a lyric in Swahili because this is about
it was Stevie Wonder.
Stevie
I watched
Wonder,
this,
okay,
and then
yes.
Waylon Jennings walks out.
That's right. He walks out, and then Geldof, who's there, comes over and says, "Boys,
They don't speak
They don't
Swahili
speak
in Ethiopia.
That's right. The people you want speak English, and they're white." And he just tells them, and then they all go, "Yeah, I guess that's right." And on they go. It was 4 a.m.
I watched that dog you're referring to on We Are the World, and that moment when you see Waylon Jennings just walk out, it's like he's just like with Stevie going on and singing in Swahili. He's like, "I'm out of here." Waylon Jennings tapping
and
out.
Sheila E. At the minute she
and
realizes
she's just bait, right? She's just bait for Prince.
For Prince, to get Prince in. And as soon as Prince says, "I ain't coming," all of a sudden she goes from having a solo. She's in the back there with one of Michael Jackson's brothers. It's cold. It's cold.
Oh my God, that's right, and that's fantastic. Okay, now no, I'm going to
again.
I just one last note on that, and then I want to ask you about something that's a big part of
Do
your
you have any
professional
water
life.
here? Is it possible to get it?
You know what? I can grab you water, but I mean, let me set you up. You start talking, and I'm going to get you a glass of water.
I'm starting to get parched.
I'm going to get you. I should have offered you one. Here's where I'm
I can
setting
have
you
the
up.
beer if you don't mind.
Well, it's your beer.
Yeah, I'll have a beer.
Okay. Look, Bruce Dowbiggin
Drinking
cracking
the
a
product.
beer here. Which one you grab? Okay, Burst. That's actually one of my favorites. That's the IPA I drink typically, but now that the Sunny Side is
Well, that's
available.
why I did this one. That allows you to do your.
And I'll replenish your supply before you go here, because you know what you drink doesn't count against your allotment.
Okay.
And remind me, because I know you have a gift for me. A little birdie tells me you have a gift for me,
Yeah.
and then I have a couple of tips
and
for
for
you.
kids too.
But now that we're inundated in sports with gambling ads, sports gambling. Like this
Right.
is relatively new still, but it's everywhere. Like you can't watch a game without seeing ads, and it's embedded within the broadcasting. It seems like all the money is coming from sports gambling outfits. So now that the sports, baseball and every other sport is cozied up with sports betting, this story with Shohei Ohtani and Jonte Porter, like this is just now part of being in bed sleeping with the enemy. Am I right? Like it's now you're trying to have your cake and eat it too. Am I out to lunch
Well, so people know
eating cake?
they cannot take any piece of the action. So the sports leagues cannot have any portion of the action. So whatever is bet on it, that is off limits. What they can do is do arrangements with casinos and houses and online stuff in terms of promoting the product and saying, like Gretzky does, MGM casinos, and he comes out in a lion roars and I don't know whatever else he does. and come out. So there isn't that attachment. The league doesn't have anything to do with the betting and what's going on there. They're not getting any money from it. But the proximity is, it can be worrisome. So one of the better things, I think, is that since we first have seen the Ontario the Ontario wagering sites, Alberta has one now, and I think we're going to have a few others, but you guys are ahead of us here. But the first commercials were so bad. The first touches of this in the public eye with people who I know. I don't want to get into naming Cabby, but, people who were doing ads, they just were not really good. And I thought, who is going to watch this ad and say, this is time I got into betting or whatever. And Dan O'Toole, I think they would do Bet Rivers. They were just, the commercials are just not good enough. And that put a lot of people off because, okay, if you're going to waste my time with this stuff, at least make it entertaining like the insurance people do. They don't sell you insurance. They sell you the guy telling you you're like your parents now, right? That's what they do. So the same thing with the betting people is they've got to find a way to make it seem entertaining with much better commercials.
I believe we have a law. I don't know when it takes effect. Maybe it took effect. I don't know. But about you, in Ontario, you can no longer have celebrities in the gambling ads. Okay, because the aforementioned Dan O'Toole was on this program a couple of weeks ago. Great episode, by the way. Catch up with Dan O'Toole. He talks about everything. And I asked him straight out because he's like the face of Bet Rivers. And he says the way they're playing it is he's not a famous person, Dan O'Toole. He's an actor in these ads. So he's not like it's unlike the Gretzky ads, where it's like Gretzky's Gretzky, and Gretzky is very famous and therefore cannot promote that in Ontario, I suppose, with this new law, where they're going to let, until somebody calls him on it, Dan O'Toole can star in Bet Rivers ads as the actor playing the anchor in the Bet O'Toole ads.
And that's what it looks like.
Bet Rivers ads. Yeah.
Dan's level of notoriety or public.
But in the Canadian sports world, everyone knows Dan O'Toole.
Yeah, that's part of the problem. That's part of the problem. It's
interesting though.
And one last thing about the betting controversy as it's been going on is I hear people getting very excited. We cannot have gambling. What about the kids? Think of the kids. They're watching betting information. Blah blah. First of all, you cannot bet legally until you're 19 in this province. At that point, you're an adult enough to waste your money. You can drink Great Lakes
beer at that age.
Absolutely. You can do all of those things. The idea that there's these 11-year-olds who've got dad's phone and they're doing props on a Friday night, that's not the reality of it. That's not the reality of it. And secondarily, and here we are having a nice...
I've replenished...
I'm having a beer, of your beers. Is that from the time I was 5 years old, we had alcohol ads on Hockey Night in Canada. It was quite clear that they were married. Alcohol and hockey were married.
Who didn't follow the Molson Cup 3 stars, okay? This was a big deal to me.
It was a big deal, I'm sure. Who was leading the Molson Cup? Especially in the bad years of the Leafs. And they'd have the Molson
Rick Vibe once again. Oh, yeah. Dan Dow.
It would be Dan Dow. It would be somebody a little more down the line. Yeah. Felix Potvin wins 2 games in a month, but
he did get to the Final Four twice, Bruce. I just had Kevin Shea in here, and he made sure to get a guitar for, apparently Felix Potvin was a big metalhead, and got a guitar for him from
Felix
Sepultura. I can't even say the name of these rock and roll groups, but
Felix is the reason that my pal Grant Fuhrer ended up leaving Toronto as well. I did Grant's biography with him. Story of a legend, I guess.
Good golfer, right?
What's that?
Good golfer?
Yeah. Not good enough to get to where he wanted to. He basically quit school at 14 or 15 out in Victoria when he was with the Victoria Cougars. And when he was supposed to be studying, he was golfing. And he put all his eggs in the hockey basket that he was going to be there. Yeah. And it paid off for him. It worked out for him. But that was the trade that he came in with Glenn Anderson from Edmonton. Cliffy brought them in. And then all of a sudden, Felix just played the ass off of everybody. And they sent Grant off to Buffalo, where he was pushed aside by, what's that guy's name? I forget the guy. Dominic Hasek. Yes, right. Hasek booted him out.
Second greatest goaltender in NHL history.
Yeah, I would say so. I wrote a book with him, too.
Okay.
Fabulous, interesting guy. I remember we were talking about it last night because with our guests, we're watching the hockey game at the Scotiabank Center. But the best line I ever heard about goaltending was I was doing the book with Dom. We were in Buffalo. It was a snowy night. It was about 18 feet of snow. Yeah. And we're sitting in a restaurant. I said, who's the hardest guy for you in the league? Lemieux. Lemieux. He's
okay.
He's okay. But the rest of them, nobody. I said, really? Nobody worries? He says, you know who really worries me? I said, who's that? My defenseman. He said, if they're not where they're supposed to be, he said, I'm effed. I don't know if I can use that word on your channel.
You can say that.
Yeah, well, he said,
It's a podcast.
He said, I'm fucked. and all of a sudden, goaltending made perfect sense to me.
Yeah.
And when I watch the games now, and the thing in the Leafs game last night that was very successful in the first 2 periods was the Leafs kept all the shots to the sides. And Samsonov, it was Samsonov last night.
Yep.
He was able to position himself. He knew where the shots were coming from. He looked like a genius. And as soon as the puck started coming from the center of the ice, then it's more problematic for any goalie. And Dom understood that. And I interviewed him actually in Nagano after the shootout when he beat Team Canada.
Right.
And he was laughing. He said, I knew that they could barely hold their sticks. They were so nervous. Wow. And he said, I noticed out in front of I'm digressing. But
no,
anyway.
I love this story because this is the famous shootout where Gretzky was on the bench and
Yzerman. He didn't use Yzerman either. And he said, I knew that they hadn't flooded the ice, and I knew the ice in front of my net was chippy, and it was not going to be easy to handle. And he said, so I went out right away and challenged the guys because I knew if they tried to stick handle, they would lose the puck. And I think maybe the only guy who even got close might have been Lindros. I think Lindros tried to deke him, and it went beside the net. But the rest of the time, and he saw, who was it? Who shot last? Was it Ray Bork or somebody? Can't remember. I think it was Shanahan shot last. Anyhow, he said the guy was just destroyed. Before he even shot the puck. Wow. Because there was so much pressure. I mean, I don't say that to criticize the shooters and the Canadian guys. They meant well, but
that Canada, that was the big 98. That was we got to win gold for the first time in 46 years or whatever it was. I think so, because I think in 2002 when we do win gold in Salt Lake City, I believe that was like 50 years. I think. Yeah,
they finished 7th, I think, in Nagano. Right. It was pretty bad.
We had summits and
and the American team, and I'd done work with Chelly, who's just. He and Holly and a couple other guys were going out every night and like drinking trays of beer, not just a few beers, trays of beer, and going and playing the next day. I mean, dozens and dozens of beers after a game or after a practice. And finally, the American team started getting like, this is a good optic for us. I love Chelly. If you ever can get Chelly, he's a lot of fun.
Well, I mean, I love these guys who play into their 40s, right?
Well, I thought when I was doing the book with him, he was like 40, and I thought, well, I hope I get the book out before he retires.
He's 45 or something.
The bastard lasted till 45. Yeah. And I went to one of his workouts, and this is before we had the really serious stuff about conditioning. Chelly was one of the first guys who had a private guy, and he would go and do 2 hours in the morning and 2 hours in the afternoon, and then he'd play a game that night. And I'm thinking, where is all this coming from? But that's what helped him survive as long as it did.
So your Grant Fear book, Grant, of course, had a cocaine problem.
Yeah, we dealt with it in the book. I was worried. Grant is not long spoken about things. So I go to Palm Springs where he lives to do the interviews for the book, and I started off with a sort of softball to get things going. I don't remember what it was, but right. Do you remember your first game playing hockey as a kid? Oh, yeah, I was a kid. It was good. Yeah, we had a lot of fun. Yeah. I'm going like, Grant, we got to do 60, 70,000 words. We had a lot of fun. Yeah, isn't going to get us there.
Look, so as a podcaster, those are the tough interviews when you're pulling the teeth. Yeah.
So I was worried where we would go, but he was honest, and two things were happening at the same time. One, he obviously he and other people in the team who will go nameless were having a lot of fun with Blow, but his dad was also dying of cancer. And so the two things kind of married a little bit. And he said that when the puck went in off his pad in '86, when Steve Smith's shot hit his back of his leg and went into the net, that allowed Calgary to win the series. Right. He said, I basically fell off a cliff that summer. He said, I disappeared into a dark place. And we talked about it. And he said the irony was that by the time the NHL got around to disciplining him, he'd basically cleaned up his act. He'd had the ability to get past it, and he said it was kind of funny that he had to sit out a whole year when he'd cured the whole thing for himself. And as far as I know, he might have a beer or something like that, but golf is his addiction now, as you just were suggesting.
Oh, like Humble Howard's. That's his drug of choice is golf. Okay. In 1988, where were you in your career in 1988? Remind me.
CBC at 6 and at 11, the studio on Church Street. Okay. Doing stuff there, and I think, I'm trying to remember all the other things that were happening at that time. But that was just about the time I started being introduced to people like Carl Brewer and the Eagles and stuff. We were just kind of heading into that. I read David Cruz and Alison Griffith's book, Net Worth. And I remember reading the book and thinking, all this stuff nobody talked about in the hockey world. This is great stuff about these people. And I said, how can I be doing this show every day and miss it? So that was kind of the start. It took me 8 years of work before he finally went to jail, and sort of we resolved.
Alan Eagleson, of course. So,
Yeah.
Okay. So maybe, I know we've only got about 10 minutes here, but I feel like we didn't do a proper service. Like your first visit, like I said, we talked for a long time, but there's a lot of ground I wanted to cover with you. And then we get off on these tangents, and I realize I'm having a great time. I'm interested in your insight. And next thing you know, it's like, oh crap, I got to do something for money in a couple minutes or whatever. So I feel like your next visit, I would love to do like a thorough deep dive into your role in the investigation of Alan Eagleson, because you're such a key player in that. And we can talk about Russ Conway, and we can talk about
Sue Foster, Carl Brewer.
Right.
Yep.
Absolutely. Yeah.
All of whom have
Who's,
passed away now.
Carl Brewer's partner, Susan Foster. Yeah. Right. And then, because I don't want to do it injustice by burning it up here in 5 or 10 minutes here. So this is sort of a teaser. The next time you're visiting your son here, or you're hanging out in the T-Dot, come down here, and you'll get more pasta. You'll get more Great Lakes beer. We'll take care of you. Maybe you'll get another smart speaker from Moneris, and we will really dive into this. It's a fascinating story. The more I read about it, in fact, this was my plan today, and then I realized, the show got away from us here, because I'm going to ask you about something else in 1988.
Well, I'll be disciplined next time.
No, don't do that. Those are boring guests. You don't want to discipline guests. You want to be able to go around and come back. So Alan Eagleson deep dive with Bruce Dowbiggin. Who was there? We're going to totally do this. And I was reading more about Russ Conway, like just his role in it all. And I know he's no longer with us either. And I want to...
Fascinating guy, yeah. No, it just, he taught me how to be a reporter. I mean... I was always trying to rush stories to air, and Russ was about let's make sure we get it done the right way. And his whole thing through it all was we had all of these hair-raising stories, personal stories about people involved, and he said no. He said we're going to do the documents, we're going to do the facts. We're not going to get into the gutter, because then they'll start throwing stuff at us, and you don't need that. We just wanted to stick to the facts. And I give CBC circa 1990, Slawko Klimke, who was the producer at the time there, I give him tons of credit because he let me do this story. And my colleagues at other places either didn't get the ability to do it or were not encouraged to do it until it was much later on in the story. So I give CBC a lot of credit for that.
Well, I'm sure there were many a legal threat and intimidation faced during this period. So CBC had to have your back for you to do your job.
The interesting thing was that I had a phone call. Somebody said, there's a bullet waiting for you type of thing. And this was when we were kind of brushing up against some political stuff. And I was worried about it. But at that point, we had no faith in the RCMP doing the story properly. We felt the RCMP was immediately going to take that material to people in political circles. And Alan Eagleson was a political person. So the first person I called was the FBI guy who I'd been dealing with on the thing. And I said, what should I do about this?
Right.
And he said, well, we know about it now, and we will look into it. Yeah, that's one small
No, and I just though, if your employer is not willing to, protect you from the legal threats, at least, maybe the bullet's another story.
Well, we had a libel trial. They sued me for libel, the Eagleson family, and we won. And it was fascinating to sit in court and watch how that happened.
This is all a teaser. I cannot wait now, Bruce, till your next visit to the T-Dot here.
My daughter gets married this summer. I'll be back.
Okay, we're going to do the Alan Eagleson deep dive. I want the info. I want everything.
I'll tell you one quick story.
Sure.
Relating to Florida. One of my neighbors down in Florida is a guy who was if I named him, you would know who he is. He was a big sports guy on Hockey Night in Canada. Anyway, he was one of my neighbors.
Al Strachan.
I couldn't possibly comment. And Strack has hated me with a passion since that story happened. Because I don't know why.
You're on a long list, by the way.
He hates everybody. I was a TV guy, and I wasn't supposed to be doing this, and I was a guy who put makeup on to do his job and all that sort of stuff. And to this day, he still grinds it with me. Says hi to my brother. But
he's an FOTM, much like yourself, friend of Toronto Mike. Al Strachan's been on the program.
Oh, really? Oh, well, that's good. He's very bitter about a lot of things, and interesting. And
Well, it's funny that you know him. Like, of course, I know who you're talking about, Al Strachan. But he's one of the few. Who was it pointing this out? Was it Steve Buffery? Somebody was pointing out, like, apparently in Canadian sports media, there's only so many staunch conservatives.
There's 4 conservatives,
Oh, yeah.
and 2 of them aren't talking to each other. Well, I'll talk to Al. Yes, that's true. It's a great story.
That's what it is.
It's Buff and me.
Oh,
and,
the Buff retired now, yeah. Who else?
And Strack, and I've forgotten who the 4th
Who is
one
the 4th? Come up with that 4th staunch conservative in this sports media universe here. Okay, so they're all excited about the teaser. We're gonna do the episode, but I do have the actual legal verbiage in the new sports betting rules. You ready? And then I know you have a gift for me, and I want to give you a couple of pieces of advice that go after you give me a gift. See, like here I am asking for a gift, but as of February 28th, okay, so this has been in effect for a while now. February 28th. See, notice how I put the rue in February. I'm a professional, Bruce. iGaming ads. I'm reading this courtesy of Canada Kev, who copied and pasted it. iGaming ads, even if previously approved by Telecaster, cannot contain athletes, active or retired, or celebrities, and then in parentheses, including role models, social media influencers, entertainers, cartoon characters, and symbols that appeal to minors, period. I guess I don't know why I put the afflection on that. Athletes and celebrities would be able to appear in ads promoting responsible gambling. So look forward to the Gretzky ads where you know your limit, play within it. Shout out to Peter Gross.
Well, they do all that stuff. They do put the phone numbers, the Vegas channel that I talked about all the time, give you the phone numbers, etc. But the thing that they need to do is tell you what the odds are of you winning or losing. Seriously, if you're 57, 58%,
Like
that's
actual,
good.
right.
That's good in the gambling world. You're not going to get there. And if you're trying to get somebody off of gambling, that's probably the best way to do it.
Well, I can, as a friend of Peter Gross, everything is having the discipline to say, okay, I enjoy this, so I'll make up numbers. This $2,000 is what I'm going to spend on this passion of mine. And when I run out of this $2,000, I'm done until whenever. And,
Yeah, that's what you have to do.
But not as you know, not everybody can. The
can't.
problem is not everybody can do this. Just like some people can drink responsibly and enjoy their Great Lakes beer like you can, and some people need to not consume alcohol because they'll wake up in a ditch or something.
But we're adults, and we understand that 20% of the people are going to have trouble with gambling, with drinking, etc. How do we deal with that in a responsible way? Do we make everybody miserable, or do we just try to figure out the best way to deal with those people, help those people?
Right. Yes, I'm with you. Okay, so
Libertarian that I am.
let me give you a piece of advice.
Yes, go ahead.
You were just in Florida. I know you're well, how would you refer to yourself? Semi-retired? What are you?
I'm working on 2 books at the same time, so I'm and my website.
That's
so
not how you retire.
You know what? I'm busy.
You're a busy man. Okay.
I'm busy.
Well,
I'm not really making a ton of money.
You've made your money. Okay.
Yeah.
You
My little money.
You've
yes.
got Gemini Awards. 2 of them at least. Last check.
Yeah.
Where are they right now? Those Gemini Awards.
They're on the mantle.
Okay, so they're on
They're on the
display
mantle,
somewhere.
yeah.
And again,
I'm very proud of it.
We-
I paraphrase Patrick Roy when I get in trouble with people on social media and they start yelling at me. I go, "Sorry, I can't hear you. My 2 Gemini Awards are blocking my ears."
and you mentioned Dominic Hasek, and I blurted out second greatest NHL goaltender of all time because that's
number
the guy
one?
I put number 1.
Patrick?
That's who I put number 1. Yeah.
As a Red Wing fan, I liked Patrick because, of course, he screwed up that one playoff series that led the Red Wings win.
Well, and I think and again, I only know what I saw with my eyes. So if you're going to tell me it's Jacques Plante, I'll be like, I'm sorry, I didn't.
Great. Terry
Or
Sawchuk,
Ken
I think, was
Dryden,
more
actually.
important than
Sawchuk, right.
But in terms of Patrick Roy, the chapter in the book is a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun to research. He played on a terrible junior team in Granby. He was giving up 5 and 6 goals a night, but he was also had 60, 70 shots a night. So
Right.
yeah, anyhow, it's an interesting story, and he is flamboyant.
Absolutely. A shout out to FOTM Randy Drusen, who actually wrote a book on the greatest goaltenders, and we had that great debate because
Yep.
she says it's Hasek, and I say it's Patrick Roy. But she also spent 5 years, I think, living in the Czech Republic, which I called Czechia because I watch sports, and it's now
It is
being
now Czechia.
Yes, but she said nobody in Czech Republic. They laugh. They say it's not.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I thought they were the ones who
I
changed
know.
it.
And I'm like, all I know is what TSN puts on the bottom and the Chiron. Okay, they're calling it Czechia. So
I
I'm
always wanted
adapting.
a new team in the World Championships. They're good. Who's this Czechia?
Right.
We've added them.
Took me a little while to catch on here. I am letting you know, Bruce, whether you manage your own financial investments or you have someone who does that for you. There is some great advice, best practices, great knowledge to be had by subscribing to the free podcast, the Advantaged Investor podcast from Raymond James Canada, hosted by Chris Cooksey. Great insight in there. So subscribe to the Advantaged Investor podcast. And if you have old electronics, maybe a drawer full of cables, you got old phones, don't throw that in the garbage. The chemicals end up in our landfill. Go to recyclemyelectronics.ca, put in your postal code, and it'll be like, oh, Bruce, drop it off here, and we'll properly recycle it so that those chemicals don't end up in our landfill. You got those 2 tips?
I got them.
You got a gift for me or what? I've been waiting.
I do. Well, I can't give it to you because that would seem like I'm pandering, and that's it's
too late.
It's too late. I'm pandering. So this is for your kids, and of course the other big story right now is Caitlin Clark,
I watched last night.
the hoops player for Iowa.
30 points, I think. Or
Yeah,
something.
30 or 40, whatever it was, and they're on to the final 4 or whatever. She is the big story.
Yeah.
So I have got
Big
you
time.
an Iowa Hawkeyes.
Oh my gosh.
toque.
Okay, I watched last night.
An
Rooting
official.
She's unbelievable. She's shooting it like she's Steph Curry out
For
there.
people who can't see it, it's got a black cuff, but it's got the Iowa Hawkeye.
That's amazing.
And a big eye there. So there you go.
Well, thank you very much. I did because that was the rematch from last year's
So put it
final,
on for
LSU,
the next game.
and I watched attentively. And Caitlin Clark has done something I didn't think would happen, where I'm as excited to watch the women's NCAA as I am to watch the men's.
Yeah.
And Caitlin's a huge part of that. And that was-
My pleasure.
Thank you so much. Now, just on the way out here,
Yes, sir.
1988, Seoul, Korea. Do you know what happened there?
Well,
Okay.
I know Mary Ormsby's got a book.
Yeah, so I have it around the corner, actually. So I got a copy of the book, and Mary Ormsby's coming in to talk about it. But I also produce a show with Donovan Bailey. And in my really brief chat here on the way out here, I'm checking we're good on time for a couple more minutes here. If you have it, is, again, we could have spent 90 minutes talking about the Trump Bibles. How many copies of the Trump Bibles did you buy, Bruce? I know that was the question people were hoping I'd ask you. You several? How many? How many copies?
Oh, at least 12.
One for every
One
room
for
in
every
your
month.
mansion.
Every month, yeah, sure.
Your Trump Bibles. Okay. Value at half the price, if you ask me. Okay, so what you were in the sports media at CBC in 1988 when Ben Johnson, we can put an asterisk beside it. I sometimes always want to say Asterix because I used to read these comic books called Asterix.
Yeah, my kids do, yeah.
And I used to buy them across from the on Markham Street, across from the now gone Honest Ed's. There was a bookstore. I used to go there. I think it was $5, which was a lot actually for a book at the time. And I'd save up my money and go buy copies of Asterisks. But this is an asterisk, and it's not an Asterix. Okay, get it right, Mike. But regardless, Ben won gold medal in that 100 meters before they took it away from him.
Yeah.
I'm curious because I'm going to be reading this book shortly and talking to Mary about it. But do you think it's time possibly to look back at that and maybe with a kinder, gentler spirit for Ben, who even though Ben did cheat, like probably everybody else in that 100-meter final, he may have been done dirty by his country, etc. I'm just curious, what are your thoughts on the legacy of Ben Johnson as we look back at what happened in 1988.
He was an easy target for the IOC to, use him. Canada was an easy target. I don't think anyone thought that they could cause a lot of problems. The Americans were very adamant that nothing happened to any of their people. Coca-Cola is one of the major sponsors. Coca-Cola basically bought the '96 Olympics for Atlanta. So
Yeah.
I think he was a convenient guy. A lot of people were dirty in the race. I'll be interested to see what Mary has come up with. I did a book with Donovan, which never got published.
Really?
Yeah.
Why?
You
What
can ask him
happened?
about that. Well, we delivered a first draft, and then Key Porter went bankrupt. And then I had to spend about 18 months finding a new publisher for it. And, of course, as time goes by, Donovan becomes less famous to people. There's fewer people who remember the Olympics. And by the time we got around to finding a new publisher, Donovan wanted to go in a different direction. He didn't want to talk too much about how much money he'd made and which women he'd been with and all that sort of stuff. I said, Donovan, that's what they want to know from you. They want to know what the life was like.
Because and again, I'm ashamed to say I actually have not read it yet, but he did put out a autobiography last year.
Yes, I saw it. Great stories. He was having arguments with his wife on the day of the race. He's in the green room to go out and run the 100 meters, and he's sitting there with his headphones on and nothing else. And he's just sitting there with his Johnson hanging out, looking at the guys saying, nah, you're not going to win today. You're not going to. Well,
that's like Patrick Waugh, right?
Yes.
You're not beating me today.
He was a very confident guy, and then winning the relay. And I still say the 100 meters, and I covered it in Atlanta, that was probably the most exciting event I saw personally.
Okay, you were there. You were there.
Yeah.
Yeah. I always, whenever I talk to Donovan, which is often, the fact that 1988 happened and we had the fastest man in the world, and then we had to watch it all unfold as it did, and then only let me do quick math. 8 years later, to have the fastest man in the world and it didn't unravel, it just felt like it meant a lot to this country's psyche.
It's a great story about him too. He wanted to play basketball. He had finished at Sheridan. He goes down to see the Canadian Track and Field Championships because there's a bunch of his buddies there, and he said, "I can run as fast as them." And the next thing you know, he's there. And of course, the establishment doesn't like him because he doesn't toe the line.
Right.
And he ends up going down to LSU with Dan. I've forgotten Dan's last name all of a sudden. Dan Pfaff?
Pfaff, something like that. Yeah, I think.
I've forgotten all of a sudden. I apologize to Dan. Anyhow, he went down to LSU and trained, and Shaq was there at the time.
With a P.
Yeah, Shaq was there at the time, and they basically created him into what he was. And the whole time I'm interviewing him, we talked hours. I don't know how many dozens of hours, and I kept going back. I said, "Donovan, how can you tell me drugs weren't involved?" And he said, "They weren't." And he said, "My secret," he said, "I slept 14 hours a day." He said, "Sleep is extremely important."
You know how many times I've looked him in the eyes, right on this table here, and just said, 0 performance enhancing drugs. So he's adamant he did it clean, and I believe the man. And Ben,
I'm sorry the book didn't come out.
so.
I had a good time with him, and I have certainly no ill will.
Is that the
towards
most writing you've done for somebody of that stature with a book that never came out?
I have a full book in my drawer that I did with Greg Zahn. And well, we all know what happened next.
You know, it's funny you mentioned Greg Zahn because I almost dropped this anecdote and I thought, oh, I say it too often. But we were talking Dave Winfield. You know, Winfield wants noise. And then I remembered before he was a Blue Jay when he killed the Seagull at the CNE Stadium. And then I remember Jamie Campbell sitting down here making his Toronto Mike debut telling me that he went and picked up the carcass of that seagull and kept it with him. And then... I was thinking in that same conversation, there was a lot of Zahn talk because Jamie and Zahn were very close.
Yes.
Very close.
Oh, it's a great book. I wish I could publish it. He taught me about
Zahn
pitching.
Cherry?
Yeah, he taught me about pitching.
There's a guy with no confidence problems, right?
No.
Greg Zahn?
No. He's got swag. You know, that's a baseball thing, and it just doesn't fit in today's world. I think he's coaching a minor league team somewhere, and he looked like it was all over, but he's got one now.
He definitely wants to get into coaching, and
they won't let him. He's persona non grata right now.
He's been Kelly Gruberd.
Yeah, he's a character. And if you have him, there's things like Scott Moore and the people at Sportsnet were worried about him all the time that he'd say something or do something, and I think it was convenient for them to get rid of him when they did.
Bruce, I can't wait for your next appearance where we'll run out of time and we won't get to Alan Eagleson. It'll be like that. Was that Jimmy Kimmel when Matt Damon is always in the green room or whatever? They never get to him.
Yes.
But
hey, listen, it's a lot of fun. I'm glad to come in.
Don't leave without that lasagna. Is that going to your son?
Absolutely. He's got a little daughter he's got to feed.
Nice. Thanks for the hat.
Thank you. I look forward to seeing you again. And of course, I listen all the time.
And not just when Pakin's on.
No, especially not when Pakin's on.
And that brings us to the end of our 1,464th show. You can follow me on Twitter and Blue Sky. I'm at Toronto Mike. Dowbiggin's at Doughboy, but it's DOW.
BBOY.
Right. Find them and basically subscribe to the blog. And what is it called?
NotThePublicBroadcaster.com.
NotThePublicBroadcaster.com. I wonder what that's referring to. Much love to all who made this possible. That's Great Lakes Brewery. That's Palma Pasta. That's RecycleMyElectronics.ca. That's Raymond James Canada. That's the Toronto Maple Leafs baseball team. That's Menaris. Welcome back, Menaris. And Ridley Funeral Home. Speaking of baseball, my guests tomorrow are the Toronto Stars' Gregor Chisholm and his maritime buddy, Jobs. We got lawyer in Jobs. We got baseball write-in Jobs. Keegan Matheson. So Keegan Matheson, Gregor Chisholm, together in the basement. They're going to consume a lot of Great Lakes beer.
Ask about the East Pointers.
I'm going to ask them about the East Pointers. See you all then.
Rosy and gray. Yeah, the wind is cold, but the smell of snow warms me today.
Sacré-Cœur.